All right, first time for everything. So today we're going to discuss, it's not as much of a Dharma talk as it is a discussion, a guided discussion, I guess, about Kisagotami's mustard seed. Have you all heard the mustard seed story at some point in Buddhist studying? Some yes, some no. Does anyone like reading who is here present in the room? There's like a 2-paragraph that's the story.
I could try it.
Yeah? Wonderful. So it's just, from the beginning here up until where it says commentary. Okay? Great. Do you mind being on camera, Nikki? I could, right? I'm gonna shift this over to you then. There you go.
Except you're going to have to tell me how to pronounce
it. A lot of places they separate it as 2 different words, and that's some ways easier to pronounce. Kisagotami.
Kisagotami came from a poor family, but the son of a wealthy family loved her and married her. Her in-laws treated her unkindly because of her background, but when she gave birth to a son, they finally respected her. Then, when the child was a toddler, he died, and Kisagami went mad with grief. She carried the dead child from house to house, begging for medicine to make him well, and everyone sent her away, saying, "The child is dead. No medicine can help him." At last, a kind man directed her to the Buddha. The Buddha said, "I will give you medicine to revive your child if you bring me a mustard seed from a house where no one has died." With renewed hope, Kisagami went forth to get the mustard seed, but at every house she learned that someone had died, and so, still carrying her child's body in her arms, she returned to the Buddha. "Did you bring me a mustard seed?" he asked her. "I thought that death had happened only to my little son, but now I understand that it happens to everyone. Impermanence is the universal law." She buried her child in the forest and returned to the Buddha to receive ordination.
Thank you. Sorry to make everyone dizzy here. Thank you, Nikki. So, now that you've heard of it, some of you have heard it before.
Yeah.
So, what do we already understand about it? Anyone have anything that comes to you right away with this story? It's a pretty intense story, and also kind of simple, but a pretty intense story. Why did the Buddha ask for a mustard seed, first of all? Like, why a mustard seed? I'm not sure.
It reminds me of in Christianity, if your faith is smaller than a mustard seed, but I don't remember the rest of the story.
Right.
Your faith is stronger than a mustard seed.
They're teeny tiny, right? And
yeah, they're very small.
There's a version of the story where she's supposed to fill a jar with mustard seeds from the homestead. So it's in some way it's an impossible task, and it's also something that maybe everyone at the time in that place would have had around the house. So it seems like it would be doable. So in any case, this another question: does anyone have this or is familiar with this book, The Hidden Lamp? So it's basically one of you that has it. What is it?
It's about, I haven't read it yet, but it's about feminist experience of Zen, even back when we would think that there wasn't women participating.
Exactly. So this is a woman in the time of the Buddha that ordained with the Buddha, which means 2,500 years ago there was ordinations of women, right? Which is a big deal at that time. And this is a really nice, it's women Buddhist teachers that are writing commentary on women in Buddhism from across the ages and those types of stories. So this one comes with a commentary by Christina Feldman, and is mainly actually because of the commentary that I picked this as a Dharma talk. I thought it was just such an excellent commentary. And so I want to read just a little bit, the first couple paragraphs of the commentary, and then we'll talk a little bit about the different pieces of the story and of Kisagotami's life, because I didn't know much about her other than this story until I started doing research for this talk. and she was cool. so, um, so Christina Feldman says, Kisagotami's story is the story of every mother who loses a child, the story of every human being who knows in their heart that to love, cherish, and care for another is to risk heartache and loss. As women, we hold in our lives a timeless human dilemma: to know how to love wholeheartedly and deeply, and to know how to lose that which we love with compassion and wisdom. The Buddha did not admonish Kisagotami for her grief and distress, nor did he lecture her on the inarguable laws of impermanence. Instead, he sent her into the village to find even one person who did not know the barren landscape of grief, the deep painfulness of being separated from those one holds most dear. Every home she went to, every person she spoke to, only revealed to her how vast is the landscape of loss. So, what did it do for her that she got to go and talk with all of these different people?
She didn't feel so alone.
Suddenly she wasn't alone in the grief. It was, we might not talk about it in, polite company, but it's there. It's a human experience and it's there. And he allowed her to go out and connect with it, with others. There's another place in the commentary that she talks about the realization that all mothers could experience just the same pain as she experienced did not necessarily diminish her grief, but she came to understand she wasn't alone. So what happens with us when we realize we're not the only one suffering? What happens kind of in our own practice, in our own minds, in our own hearts?
We hurt.
We hurt.
But the thing is it's a wound. It becomes a wound.
Yeah.
Like our grief becomes compassion. And we can see that everybody else experiences that too.
I can't hear them, so
Sorry.
So
sorry about that.
it hurts.
Couldn't hear.
It hurts.
It hurts.
It hurts.
But the hurt is the we that's hurting.
The hurt is a we. There's a recognition of the it's not a recognition. It's actually a bodily sensation. And it's there, and I can either block it, I can push it away, I can acknowledge it, and so, but it's there.
And you had also said the grief becomes compassion, and that it's, the grief doesn't dissipate, and I liked that point that Christina Feldman makes as well, that it did not necessarily diminish her grief. It's not like it goes away. We've suddenly had this awakening moment and we realize everyone grieves, and the grief doesn't necessarily just dissipate, but there's something that happens there.
Right. The grief doesn't stay though either.
There's a flow.
there's a yeah,
There's a transformation.
right, there's a
There's an,
what was that
there's a,
about?
there's a bonding and an openness with,
That's yeah,
so you
openness.
become more of a community of, there's a connection.
Yeah.
Right.
It's deeper.
And a spaciousness to
Mm.
it.
It seems like there's a different consciousness, almost like from feeling totally alone and separate to being part of the group.
Yeah. And it's that that understanding that our story is not an individual self story. It's that widening of perspective beyond our uniquely personal experience.
So
She
touches
says
that
this.
selfless, not that no non-self or selflessness or whatever
Exactly.
that comes in. That not rises. That is recognized. That's the
Mhm.
best I can put it.
Yeah, we remember it.
Yeah, remember. Yes,
We remember it in
Remember
a
it.
deep and visceral way,
Yeah.
right? And this is another piece that I just thought, again, it was just a really nice commentary that she had. When we understand that our personal story holds within it the universal story of all human beings, then we have the radical possibility of dissolving the boundaries of I and you, and of us and them.
So good.
Isn't that wonderful? It is. It's really wonderful. So, we would all wish to avoid a situation that Kisagotami is in. No one would want to be in those shoes. And the way the story is told as well. I read a little bit more about the kind of pre-story to this story, and it alludes to it in what's written there. She was considered kind of scrawny and ugly. And it was kind of surprising when someone agreed to marry her. And she wasn't very well thought of in the family because she was kind of scrawny and ugly at a time that was a woman's job was to not be those things. And she had this son, and the son gave her status in the family, and then the loss of a child, and then the loss of all of that support or that status as well happened at the same time. And so, whether or not any of that, losing a child is enough. You don't have to have the other stuff that you're losing as well. But it was there too for her in that time. And, I can't imagine anything more painful. But when we're in a moment of deep struggle, whatever it be, what's the opportunity there? Or there are those moments that present themselves in our lives. And so what is they stink. We want to avoid them. We don't want that condition to occur. But when it does, what's the opportunity there? And Kisagotami found it eventually, right? Here's another, just again, this commentary. I just pulled certain bits of it because it's just so good. Some of the most profound insights that liberate our hearts from struggle are found within the most deeply challenging moments of our lives. When our worlds crumble and our certainties dissolve, we face a choice: to turn toward those moments with compassion or to flee. And it's that we find a lot of ways to flee. We find a lot of avoidance tactics. But there is an opportunity there in those really difficult moments. And at least I have observed in myself and in the behavior of people around me as well, but also in myself. We spend a lot of time arguing against impermanence. We spend a lot of time avoiding challenging circumstances. you know, the avoidance of impermanence comes with some of it is us trying to stay alive or us trying to stay young. A lot of it, though, for many of us, is for us trying to keep others um, with us. It's as painful to see my father with Alzheimer's than as to think of my own death. Um, to watch him disappear and watch the pain that's creating for my mother. To watch, the ripple effects of someone disappearing from your life. Um, all of those things, the struggle against impermanence is really quite, or arguing against it, or all of that, that refusal to see it is quite strong as a human tendency, and quite strong in this culture as well, of course. um, and yet, if we think about it, does it help? Does our resistance to impermanence help changing anything? I haven't seen the helpfulness. Does that help? That I mean, have you?
No. Yeah. So lately, when I have had something, a disappointment or an illness or something, I thought, now there's something here I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be happy about this.
You're supposed to be learning and
I'm
taking the
supposed to-
opportunity of this really crappy moment.
Yeah. And I guess what I just heard was that just to get down to the reality then of everything changes. We should expect this. It's not that we've done something wrong, which is a big one for me. I couldn't have prevented it forever. Like you said, everybody's going to get it. I guess there's some comfort in that.
It's the different, in some ways there's a real distinction that people make in Buddhism sometimes between pain and suffering. And it's that pain is part of our human existence. It's just part of things. And we can learn to be with it. It doesn't mean we have to go out looking for it. It doesn't, but we can learn to be with it when it arises in a way that doesn't send ripple effects of worse things happening, in a way that when we struggle against it, when we fight, a lot of times the state that we create from that gives ourselves even more trouble and gives those around us more trouble. And you see, I've had a number of situations lately of speaking with people who've had a family member dying or who have died. And the grief comes out sideways in family members in vying for attention and belongings and wealth and all of those things that are in many ways for people ripple effects of the pain that they're feeling. And they can't just be with that pain with one another and hold it with each other without making it about something else. Sometimes that wasn't even important, like the ugly coffee pot that no one even liked when they were alive sort of, becomes a somewhere to put that angst that we have around the pain.
That would be the suffering.
That would be the suffering. So the suffering is our resistance and our struggle to the conditions that are, even when those conditions are painful. Sometimes we even put that resistance and struggle into vacations or into, any conditions that in our minds are not ideal. It can come out, and that discomfort even becomes suffering. Um, so there's another thread to this story as well about feeling and enlightenment. And one of the points that the commentator makes is that enlightenment does not mean not feeling anymore. That awakening is not about being untouchable by the human experience. And it's kind of a bummer to hear about, because I think some of us were really hoping that it was when it wasn't out. I think a lot of people come like, I really don't want to suffer anymore. So if you could just make me not feel, that would be great. But would it? Would it be great? And so this is one of the things that comes up as a theme quite a bit in this book and all the commentaries from the different teachers in this book. So that the commentator, Christina Feldman, says, I do not imagine that Kisagotami's embracing of a nun's life meant an end to her grieving. The memory of her son must have lived on in her heart and very bones, but perhaps the pain can be borne. So this practice isn't to take away our feelings or our pain. That would actually cut off our compassion or potential for being with others and all of their humanity. It's part of our humanity to have those feelings, but it can help us to stop the suffering that's perpetuated from pain and meet that pain with grace. Meet that pain with enough understanding of the we that we don't distort distort reality to make it all about us. Which can be a tendency with pain.
If I cut my toe, I want to feel pain.
That's right. If you didn't feel pain, if you cut your toe,
if I didn't feel pain,
we would not. None of us would have toes.
None of us would. Yeah, there would be. So the pain, the emotional pain and spiritual pain is similar, equal to cutting my toe.
And pain is a signal, right?
Pain is a I think we as Westerners think pain is telling us something's not right. And I don't know that that's a correct view. Because if I cut my toe, then I think, oh, that's not right. Well, I cut my toe. It's to if that's the view would be my toe needs attention, or this portion of the this is where I do. So because my toe is filled with cells, little beads, little bacteria, that kind of stuff, they need my help.
So thinking of that then on an emotional level, there are signals that we get, and sometimes it means that we just need to pay attention to that piece. And it may mean that we need to pay attention to that piece in a relationship or in a group or with others as well. And it's just drawing our focus. It's drawing our concentration for a time. There's
I never thought of it exactly that way.
Huh.
That's good.
Huh.
That pain is trying to do something. Tell us something, get our attention.
And it's easy to want to wiggle out of that because we don't like paying attention to unpleasant things.
But it hurts.
Right. So there's a piece of this then that that I really appreciated, and this is what kind of the end of her commentary, and we'll get a little bit more into Kisagotami's life as well. But at the end of her commentary, she quotes a Sri Lankan text on equanimity. Life is a play of joy and sorrow. May I remain unshaken by life's rise and fall. I care for you deeply, but sadly I cannot protect you from distress. Oh. And that is, I mean, what a beautiful, that's kind of the kicker. We'd so like to be able to protect other people from distress, loved ones that we have. Um, and and it's easy to spin off on that one. You know, all the things that I thought that I had figured out for myself, and then I have a kid, and suddenly I've got like the same delusion all over again, but about him. Right? Those delusions are kind of tricky. So, protecting someone from distress. I mean, so there was a little boy in preschool last year. Malcolm comes home swelling with pride. I have a best friend. He's my best friend. This little boy is my best friend. And we play together all the time, and he's all happy. And then a week later, the little boy told him twice on the playground to go away. He didn't want to play with him. And Malcolm hid underneath the playground equipment for a week. When we went to a school event, he was doing great and having a blast. We went with him, having a blast, and then the little boy walked in the room and he just shut down and couldn't talk anymore and didn't want to talk to anybody else. I mean, it shut him down. Social stuff is brutal, right? And all that stuff that I was like, I'm fine with that now for me. You know, I don't have the same social anxiety or shyness that I had as a kid. I've been through some of that stuff. I had bad breakups and I made it. I had that kind of equanimity about life. And then suddenly I'm like, I I want to protect him from distress more than I've ever wanted anything. Does he really have to go through all that? Isn't there a way to spare somebody from all of that? And there isn't. There really isn't. It just is each of our paths, right? It's just each of our paths. And if we think about where our compassion came from, oftentimes, if we really pick apart those moments that were catalysts for us, it was pain that we had, that there was at least enough support around in the right moments that we could not just categorize it as trauma or pain that bothers us to this day, but we had enough support around it that it actually helped us do what Buddha did for Kisagotami, and it helped us develop some sense of that's what that feels like. And I don't want to do that to anyone else, and maybe I'll pay attention when someone else is doing that to someone else, because I know what that feels like. There's a whole process here that happens with every single human being, right? That we can't skip over for anyone else. And that is really a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing to sit with when we want to spare something, when we want it to be okay for someone. Norman Fisher says, we're awakened through suffering, not by avoiding it. That doesn't mean we have to go out looking for it either. It's just, it comes. There's a lot of, Buddha went through that too, right? The whole austere practices and self-starvation and all of those pieces, and not necessarily needed, right? To go out looking for it. It just comes as part of things. Maintaining equanimity through kind of relationship and highs and lows does not mean not feeling. And I think that's one of the, when you read through this book, when you do read it, when you read through this book, there's so much of that theme that comes through. It doesn't mean not feeling. It means how do we take this signal or these signals that we have had And how do we widen our view? How do we make it bigger? How do we make, like a dear teacher of mine teaching, how do we make our caring bigger and just keep expanding it? So Kisagotami was enlightened. She was a disciple of the Buddha. She became someone who's known for wearing coarse robes, and she wore robes that were made only from scraps that she found in cemeteries. So she had some stuff going on with death in her in her enlightenment, right? She became a teacher among other nuns, and so she has a number of different. Her enlightenment poem was beautiful. Do you all know who Mara is in Buddhism? Who's Mara?
Kind of a bad person.
Bad guy, right? Mara's,
Temptation.
Mara is kind of like a confluence of all the things that would stop us from
Being
things, right? It's like
bigger than we are.
I had a person that I used to practice with that had a big altar to Mara in their area, in their attic, and he said he would meditate right by Mara because he's like, I need the visual because Mara is me. Mara is my mind. Mara is all the things that block me or that I self-sabotage about. And so I need to be looking at Mara and remember while I sit. I need Mara there. I thought that was a great idea. So there's an interaction that's recorded between Kisagotami, the awakened Kisagotami, and Mara. So Mara, the evil one, wanted to frighten her and distract her from meditation. This is what Mara does, Mara's nature. And approached her, asking, now that your son is dead, why are you not having a tearful face? Are you sitting alone under a tree looking out for a man? So again, she's not this great looking woman, and she's lost her family, she's left her. Anyway, she instantly recognized that it was Mara and responded with the following verse. I have gotten past the death of son. With this, the search for men has ended. I do not sorrow, I do not weep, nor do I fear you, friend. The light everywhere has been destroyed. The mass of darkness has also been split apart. Having conquered the army of death, I dwell without defiling pain. Then Mara realized she had recognized him and disappeared. So there's actually a bit of I learned while researching for this, there's a bit of a feminist dislike for this story because I guess it's read that there's so few women that are talked about in Buddhism. And this one is photographing a woman who could only become enlightened because she was no longer attached to being a mother. And so people are feeling like, that's all you got for me. And no, it's not all we've got for in terms of examples. It's not all we've got. We need multiple examples. At the same time, I have to note that I have heard the mustard seed story dozens of times in Buddhist talks, and I had never heard about her after awakening, like after ordination, and her life continued and blossomed, and she got to this space, apparently, where she was able to feel and yet not able to be shaken in the same way. Yay! Right? I mean, who doesn't need examples of this? So I wanted to share I wanted to share her with you for that. That that beautiful place of how do we expand out our viewpoint around suffering so that we feel it, because that is what will help us to remain human and open to this flow of compassion that is available in every moment. How do we allow for that and also get to this place where the Mara in our own mind can't shake us anymore? So just a beautiful example of it's possible. It's absolutely possible. There any comments or questions about this story? Please.
So, first of all, I was thinking when you were telling your story with your son, and talking about being open and vulnerable, and how do we do, or what does it say, being open or being present, like the fact that you've already gone through that, and you're an adult, and now you have your child. It's like you're able to be vulnerable for him and be open to that exchange rather than shutting down and like holding back, I guess, maybe. Or like if you've gone through that process of grief already, you can be there for him in a way that maybe you couldn't have been before. You haven't felt that, you know. And then I was thinking, when the feminists don't like that, I think maybe in the time that that story was done, like that was the example of the worst grief a woman could feel, is a loss of a child. So maybe, I mean, to me, it's almost, maybe not every woman has a child, but like in that time, it's probably the example that they had that was like the worst grief you could possibly feel. So that's just a couple of thoughts I have.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think
you.
for me, this is very pertinent right now, so appreciate it.
No, I appreciate your comments a lot.
I'm trying not to shut down with my two friends who are experiencing devastating illnesses, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And I noticed that sometimes when I communicate with them, I could feel myself wanting to kind of pull away because of the pain. And also the memory of a little bit of wanting it different, wanting to go back. But finding another way of perspective and seeing things differently, and still having a communication, but also not being shaken by, by the impermanence, and still able to feel and be present.
It takes a tremendous amount of presence to be able to continue to feel and watch someone that you love go through that. A tremendous amount of presence. And so natural. It's almost like this knee-jerk wishing for something else. Wishing for a cure, wishing you could go back, wishing, all of that. The thing that is amazing about people who study this path is the commitment to sitting with discomfort, really. I mean, it's not really an easy sell. But from the small to the big, it's this, you can sit for 10 more minutes even though your leg fell asleep and you, whatever. to exactly what you're describing, Navab, of this really just deeply uneasy making situation that you're able to be with people through instead of avoiding or not going to visit or all of the other things that could actually do damage in the situation. That's been a theme with my father's Alzheimer's and figuring out how to interact with the him he is now, which might be different than the him he is next week, and is certainly different than the him he was 5 years ago. And figuring out how to be with what is just essential, because otherwise there is this static of frustration, of he lives on a very feeling level now, and he knows when something, when we're not happy with him, when he should have done something differently, and he feels that shame and it shuts him down. And so the being with what is, and that ability that we hone in this practice of being able to be with discomfort is just so critical to living in the moment that we have, rather than comparing it to the moment we wish it were.
And it's like it's not that you feel real good, right? I mean,
It's not necessarily that it's a ball of fun and joy, right? Exactly. Although what's amazing is when we can just be with him right now, he's funny. When he's not shut down because he's feeling shame or like he should have known something he didn't, or he notices, he makes the silliest, funniest puns. He notices everything because he's nowhere else. He's got nothing else but the phrase you just said. And so he's going to make a joke out of it. And there is this spontaneous opening that can happen, right? That's not, we couldn't have anticipated it. And it's just an example of the gift that this practice can bring, I guess, when we can settle down with the discomfort of whatever condition is.
Well, and recognizing it's our discomfort.
Yes, did you hear that? Recognizing it's our
this
discomfort.
This isn't the situation's problem. It's not out here. The discomfort is, and
Is
so what
internal.
helps me is the leather. The leather needs to go on my feet.
Not the whole world.
Not
right.
the whole world. And so the discomfort is something is mine.
what do you
And
mean the leather?
Yeah, you want to tell that story? It's a great Shantideva teaching.
So yeah, this one helps me a lot because I used a lot. And I'll just give you the not the Paul Harvey version for those of you who are as old as I am. I'll just give you the real short version. So basically, the individuals were walking and they were getting their feet were getting all cut up and that, and they were like, "Well, we're just going to put leather. Will take care of that. We're going to put leather down." And so they got all these, all this leather, and they put the leather down, and then they realized all we can do is walk from there to there because that's all the leather we have. I can't, if I want my feet not to hurt, that's as far as I can go. And one of them finally said, there is a better way. And they're all like, well, what's the better way? What do you mean there's a better way? And so this individual takes the leather, puts it on their feet,
and then can go anywhere that they want to go. Doesn't it all had to do with um, not making the external the only focus.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times the discomfort is mine. I got one more story.
Yeah.
So I was doing a retreat at the Garshan Institute, and just the radiance I call it the radiance was just like, and so everything was just like, oh, this is beautiful and lovely, and just very blissed out. And I see this bug, and this bug has feet that are like this. It's a little tiny bug, little tiny red bug, and it's got the coolest feet that I've ever seen, and it's walking along. And so I'm trying to make sure that nobody steps on the bug, because that was my job, was to protect this bug. And so during the breaks, I would go out and make sure that the bug was still, because the bug would move really, kind of like a Zen monk, really slow. And so I go back in for meditation, and I'm like, oh, I hope nothing happens to that, bug. So I'm feeling, I'm so filled with compassion, and I'm feeling compassion for everything. And then it hit me that the reason I didn't want anything to happen to the bug is because I didn't want to suffer. I didn't want to hurt. It had nothing to do with the bug. It had to do with that I didn't want to hurt. Very painful. That was very pain. It was very painful, but that's one of those, I call them my gems. One of my gems that stuck with me. So, and discomfort is one of those too. That's one of those gems that this is mine. Done.
Yeah. One of the beauties of that discernment is without it, we really do end up trying to help and doing harm.
Yeah.
So figuring out where our stuff is and what we can do with it is really, it's a real thing. The Shanti David teaching, that teaching that I've heard various forms of that story, but is very much kind of a key in Buddhist philosophy of, we could try to make all conditions perfect, but they're not going to be. All conditions are never going to meet all of our specifications. It's just not going to happen, right? And so that doesn't mean that we can't seek to create conditions that would allow for awakening for others and for ourselves. It just means that we can't control everything. So what can we do with our own mind that can lead to that awakening and that liberation? And then whatever comes our way, we are able to work with it with grace and compassion and wisdom. So thank you all. Is there anything else? Any last other comments before we close this? We'll continue to sit for a bit. Great. Well, thank you all very much. I would say let's sit for we'll do another sit for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to do just a closing with the Sandokai. I just love the Sandokai. People chanted the Sandokai before. I know you have, Heather, and I think you have, Navab, as well. I have copies of it, and I'll screen share it as well. What we may do is simply sit, and then typically we would do the Sandokai with a full ceremony and everything. What we may do today is just chant it together while still sitting. So I'll share the screen at that time, and I'll actually just give you these to put next to your seat right now. And then we'll make sure to have that time before we close. So thank you all. And I will, there will be a few minutes here too at the end to chat. Have some tea. Thank you.